Hi everybody, happy almost Samhain. And if it's Samhain, it means it's fall, which is my favorite time of year. And up here in Maine, we don't have autumn, we have autumn! And it's crazy, and it's freezing, and the trees are already losing their shit. So, we're having a lot of fun. And being that it's almost Samhain, I wanted to talk about Halloween related stuff. So let's start with the story. So this past weekend, I went to Salem, Massachusetts, for their haunted happenings, because all of October is just Halloween, witchcraft, black cats, magic, fun stuff, spells. So I went with some friends, and we haven't been to Salem in a couple of years, at least, because it's getting old. There's nothing new, it's not really fun, it's become very, very tourist related. And I have never been this close to Halloween, at least in 7 years. This time, however, I did go very close to Halloween, and I did not wear a costume. I wore plain clothes. I went as myself. I have nobody to impress. I wore my jewelry, I wore my tie-dye dress, my boots. I was me. Regular old me. And in Salem, because it's very close to Halloween, you've got so many people that you can't walk. You cannot walk. And you've got people in plain clothes, people who are not from around the area. They're just visiting, they're doing the tourist thing. They're wearing their own clothes. You've got people in costumes, very obvious Halloween costumes, like kids in their like Spider-Man, Avengers, whatever. And then you've got groups of women and other, groups of friends wearing the witch costumes and the wizard costumes. It's a lot of fun. Some people work really hard in their costumes, and I love it, because I love costumes. But I was at lunch, people watching while I was waiting for my food. I'm like, Salem sweatshirts, witches hats, witches costumes, Salem paraphernalia everywhere. Salem hats, Salem sweatshirts, Salem everything. Even the police officers in Salem have, it says, Witch City, and it's got, a silhouette of a witch, which is adorable. I'm glad they're embracing it. However, and after I left Salem, I was exhausted. So many people, just so many energies. It's like, I can't even do this anymore. I need to go. So I went to my friend's house on my way back to the frozen north of the wall. And I stopped at her house for dinner. And I had to decompress, and I had to, stuff my face because I was so hungry and exhausted. So I was telling her, all these people, I'm seeing all these people dressed up in witches costumes, but they're costumes. They're not ritual garb. There's a very distinct difference. They've got their witches hats, they're carrying brooms, they have all this cool makeup and glitter, and they're having a ball, which is great. Please, have fun. However, I was saying to her, I was like, do you think, and this is the question I'm putting on the table for everybody here, do we think, or do you think, that people dressing up as witches, the stockings and the black dresses and the green and the purple and the hat and the broom and maybe a stuffed cat or a real cat, hey, whatever, is it a detriment to our community? Does it, in fact, perpetuate the stereotype of this fantastical witch? You know what I mean? Because in reality, witches don't just dress like that. We may dress similarly for rituals and sacred events like our holidays. We may. I've only ever worn the Cone of Power hat one time in over 10 years. It's fun. However, the Cone of Power does have symbolism in real witchcraft, which is why real witches actually do wear them. But I feel like we shouldn't be associated with the clothing, with the costume clothing. And here's another real life example you will probably be more familiar with. When you take the Native Americans argument, a very legitimate and real argument, by the way, that teams like the Cleveland Indians, the Washington Redskins, you really should change your name. You are not honoring us. You're calling us Redskins. you know? Or the idea that you shouldn't, Halloween, you shouldn't dress up as an Indian princess or an Indian chief for Halloween. The headdress you're wearing, yeah, you may think it looks cool, but the headdress actually has a lot of symbolism attached to it. It's a very real thing that you're just mocking, you're misappropriating. It's not funny. We're not a costume. And I really think in a lot of ways, pagans, at least witches, can make that same argument. It may not be quite as severe, of course, but we still have our own battles to fight. We still are not accepted, at least in a lot of ways, are not accepted in society. And I really do think it is because the costumes, Hollywood and TV shows, popular literature, not Harry Potter, of course. That's a different class all by itself. And I guess that's it. But when I see people walking down the street, not little kids trick-or-treating, that may be a little different, because in a lot of ways they are portraying storybook characters, the Wicked Witch of the West, Elphaba. We've got Once Upon a Time, Witches of Eastwick, which I know is not a children's show, bear with me. But they're at least portraying characters. I understand that. Please, I'm not saying stop walking around like Elphaba. Wicked was awesome. But what I am saying is that there is a fine line. And here's another example. I taught summer camp last year. And these are not my children. Oh Lord, are they not my children? I cannot say a lot of things around them that I normally would if they were my own, or my friends' children, or my cousins. So you gotta really watch what you say. You're being paid to babysit these kids and teach them things, and I'm afraid I was always gonna teach them the wrong thing. So I had one girl who was always so curious. She would always ask me things. She loved history, so I would always quiz her on history things. And then one day we just happened to get to the idea of witches, and we got there through King Henry VIII, of course, burning women at the stake because of witchcraft and all that stuff. And then she said witches aren't real, and I said, well, no, of course they are real. They're very, very real. And she looked confused. The reason why she was confused is because as a 9-year-old child, the idea of witches that she has in her head are from TV, from movies, from books, from fairy tales, even dolls. I'm sure that there's a witch Barbie somewhere. There's Monster High. And she was just, I had to explain to her what real witchcraft was. And the sad thing is, I had to do it so carefully, because the last thing I needed was for this excited, impressionable 9-year-old to go home to her parents and tell her camp teacher was teaching her about witchcraft. I know I would have lost my job. It's very sad to think about that it's like that. And it is, even in Massachusetts. So, while I'm not saying you can't, to the non-pagans, you can't dress up as a witch for Halloween, I'm not saying that. Of course you can. I'm not that offended. But what I really am encouraging people to just take into consideration, even if you don't automatically accept it as a real argument, what I'm saying is that taking everything I've already said, children and adults don't think that witches are real. I've had a drive-by herp-derp. Witches are not real, and I'm like, you're in the wrong state to be saying that. You know what I mean? Of course they are. But the reason why people don't think they are, and again I'll say, it's pop culture. What Hollywood does to witchcraft. What Hollywood does to paganism in general. There needs to be a clear distinction. What people need to take into consideration and just think about. Mull it over in your head. When you dress like a witch and go out in public, you're perpetuating the idea that that is what a witch is. You know what I mean? Take Vikings, the Saxons, these warrior cultures. You still think that they were barbaric, sacrificial beasts that killed each other randomly and were just cold, heartless, vicious, cruel monsters. It's because, well, history being written by the victors, that's what was written about them by the people they conquered. In actuality, how are they much more different than we are? We go to war with people. We have war. We kill people. There's not much difference. The difference is who they conquered, when they conquered, the culture that they had. Because they were polytheistic pagans with warrior culture invading Christian societies, England, Mercia, Northumbria, Wessex, Essex, East Anglia. Not much different than today. Very little different from today. However, we know today that the Vikings, of course, and the Celts too, were not barbarians. They weren't. They were just like we are. They loved, they had families, very multi-dimensional people. They were not all 6.5 feet tall with blonde hair, beards, and huge freaking biceps. They were not. You're thinking of Minnesota Vikings, I think. The stereotypical idea of a Viking. And I think nowadays, fast forward about 1,500 years, our society has done the same thing to the pagan community still. Witches should be feared. Pagans should be feared. They perform sacrifices. They wear creepy clothing. They want to corrupt the children. They want to convert you to their heathen ways. They worship the devil. Obviously, we know this isn't true. But the way to fight against these is to legitimately fight against them. When people wear, again, I'm repeating myself, when people wear the witch Halloween costumes and the hats and the cloaks and the hold the broomsticks and the black cats, they're perpetuating the stereotype that people are already afraid of, that people already don't trust, that people already think is funny, ha ha, it's from that movie, it's from that book. Let's just think about this for a second. Real witches don't really dress like that. And when they do, it's not cheap department store costumes. We make our costumes, they're not costumes, we make our garb ourselves. They're ritual, they have meaning. So let's think about that. We should be considering teaching our kids and each other what these religions really are about. They are real people involved in them. We are real people. We are not being defined by our costuming. We should be defined by our history, by our beliefs and practices, who we are as people. I'm not saying label us. I'm not saying label pagans. I'm saying understand them. And I'm also saying don't accept the cultural misconception of it because it's more fantasy. I know the fantasy aspects of paganism and witchcraft are really attractive. And again, that's why Salem has gotten so big with its tourism. It's because it's pushing the fantasy aspects, the magic spells and the mystery and the new age. It's pushing that. People are very attracted to that, and I understand. That's another video entirely. I understand that fantasy, the possibility of these things that we have always believed were not real, were fantasy, were fairy tales, well, they actually are partly true. There's something to it. People want to access that. However, the way to do it is not the way we are doing it. I say we collectively, we. It's not saying this spell, you think it's fake, but it's actually real. Cast this spell and you'll get what you need or want. No. What we really should be doing is saying, yes, we look like fantasy. We look fantasy. And because we're real and we look fantasy, that makes us really attractive. And you want to dress like us and be like us, and we're cool. It's cool to emulate us. Well, yeah, we are cool. But what it shouldn't be that if I cast a spell or dress this way, I'm accessing this really cool religion or fantastical history and things like that. No. You don't need to dress up. All you need to do is honestly want to know what witchcraft is. And you don't need to go to Salem every Halloween to know this. It's in books. Your own states will have shops and bookstores where you can find this information. My friends and I don't go to Salem anymore, not because we don't love it. We love the museums. We love the shops. We love meeting the people. We've met Lori Cabot a few times. She's a gem. I love her. We don't go anymore because it's no longer for us. It's for the people that try to emulate us and try to be like us without honestly and legitimately understanding who and what we are as people, and who and what we are, what our religion is, what our faith is, what our beliefs and practices are. That's what Salem has become. I love Salem, but it's not for witches anymore. It's for tourists, people who just want to play the part for a day and have fun. And that's really what I'm trying to get at. We are still so misunderstood. We are still feared by many people. But when you put a costume on and try to look like us, that's okay. And that's really what the problem is. So I hope you've made sense of my rant. I haven't taken notes. I usually have notes in front of me. But I felt like I would just wing it. And I hope you took something away from this, and I hope you have your own idea. I hope you're forming ideas of your own. So I'll see you soon. Happy Samhain.